What is up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Pod, presented by Monkey Knife Fight. As always, I am Travis Seal, coming live from Dirty Laundry Studios 2.0. Got the man with the master plan, co-hosting and West Coasting with me, Tyrell McLaughlin. How are you feeling on this fine Wednesday night, my friend?
Living the dream, doing well. Thank you. Football is commenced. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
Yeah, amen to that, buddy. I am very excited as we get into our in-season episodes, and lots to break down from this past week. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are, of course, a part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. Appreciative of all of the great people over at Fantasy Points for all of their support. If you go to Fantasy Points, you're getting elite resources, elite analysis, elite minds that all of these resources analysis are coming from. You get tons of other benefits. They got a wicked Discord channel over at fantasypoints.com where you can get access and talk to some of those minds that I just mentioned. And just last night, Ty, actually, they had a projections live stream where the whole gang got together. You had Joe Dolan, John Hansen, the legend himself, Scott Barrett, Graham Barfield, Wes Huber, and Tom Brawley were all in the lab. And of course, Ben behind the glass as well. And they had a really good show. It was a lot of fun. It's always fun when all those guys get together because they have a blast kicking the conversation off of each other. And it's fun for us to watch. So if any of our listeners want to go check that out, Ty, fantasypoints.com. And then our promo code 21TrueNorth10 will get them 10% off of the subscription over there. So in my opinion, Ty, it's already the best deal on the market. And 10% extra off the top because you're a fan of the True North Fantasy Pod is a nice little cherry to be had, in my opinion. Okay, we're getting into it, Ty. Week 1 is in the books, and we are there's a lot of overreactions coming out there, and a lot of people who are getting hyped on some of the stuff that we've seen, and rightfully so. We are here tonight to set some of that stuff straight and let you know where you maybe can overreact or maybe where you should just pump the brakes on that reaction because a lot of stuff is unfurled and a lot of stuff is yet to unfurl. So I think it's going to be fun for us to break that down. Hey, buddy?
Yeah, totally. We can Cleveland Farrell all this. I think there's a lot going on. Like a lot really does change in just 1 week. You get to confirm some biases, and then you get to also react and adapt to some things, especially injuries as those start to pile up even early on in the season after 1 week.
Yeah, and you said it, Ty. We're going to talk a little injury news right off the hop here, and then we're going to get into a nice beefy segment of trend spotting, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to look at a bunch of stuff that's happened and see if we can project that going forward, or like I said earlier, if we need to pump the brakes. And then, of course, we're going to get into I Got 5 on it with Monkey Knife Fight, and then talk a little bit of our weekly rankings because we're in the thick of it, man. We are dialing up those weekly rankings every week. So make sure if anyone wants to check those out, go to truenorthffb.com, our new website. It's been a great launch for the new site, by the way, Ty, and I'm really thankful. So anybody checking this out, tell your friends, go check it out, use the resources, right? We telling your friends is awesome, spreading the word is great. We want people to use it and make it functional for them and see how it works for them, give us feedback on that, and we can just keep adding to that for the people. So thanks for all the support to everybody out there checking out the website. That means a lot. The first thing, like you said, Ty, we're going to get into some of these injuries. The first one we're just going to kind of touch on a little bit is the Michael Gallup injury from last Thursday night against the Buccaneers. They had that lights out game to kick off the season against the Bucs. But Michael Gallup has a calf strain that's looking like about 3 to 5 weeks he's going to be out, is what I had there. And I don't think we need to go too deep into it because we were attaching to these other pieces. I think it further cements Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, Ty. But I think you had a good take on how it could be distributed just as far as how these guys are used and where on the field they are used with. I'm liking Cedric Wilson as the waiver wire pickup for this week as the third guy, but we got to be a little bit hesitant on him just stepping right into that Gallup role, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Cedric Wilson's a guy that you're going to be starting this week. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And even going forward, like I'm not sure how many snaps he's really, how many snaps we should expect him to see because all these guys can and did in week 1 play in the slot. If people are really trying to peg somebody for that slot role in Dallas, I think it's Amari Cooper 30% of the time or 20% of the time. I think it's CeeDee Lamb 20 to 30% of the time. And then the other like 40 to 60% could be a conglomerate of Jarwin and Dalton Schultz. Both tight ends can play and did in week 1 in the slot. And that goes for both running backs as well. Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. I mean, how long have we been saying, get Tony Pollard in the slot in Dallas? But yeah, we finally did see it in week 1, and we saw some receptions and snaps with both running backs on the field. So I think we do continue to target the passing game in Dallas. I think these game scripts that will be presented in that offense will just, cater to fantasy football. So I think CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper are both, wide receiver ones, top 12 wide receivers going forward. And they're the biggest winners in this, short-term injury situation with Michael Gallup. But I think it's a bump for Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin and Tony Pollard and all those guys as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. And the tight ends were really, really involved. To your point there, Ty, CD and Amari had 22 and 23 slot snaps respectively. Cedric Wilson had 23 himself. And then Jarwin had 19 and Dalton Schultz had 18. So that's some pretty good work in a really good passing offense. Remains to be seen the spread, but just like you were saying there, I would probably be targeting a little bit of Dalton Schultz and then Cedric Wilson as that kind of bottom of the depth chart fantasy piece, just in case he starts getting heavily targeted. We can be kind of ahead of the curve on having him on our rosters there. The next guy sticking with the wide receivers, Ty, is a formerly big star and somebody who's just been battling to get back on the field, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. He's still recovering from last year's ACL tear, and it's hurting. I was expecting a little bit of a bounce back. I thought he was going to play last week. I actually, I'll be honest here, Ty, he was in one of my rosters and I was out and about with the family and was not able to get to my rosters before that afternoon game slate. So I did accidentally start him in one spot, unfortunately. But what's your take on Odell being out for a little bit, and how are you attacking this passing game in Cleveland?
Yeah, I'm probably not. I think I can't remember who they have. Do they have Houston this week?
They do, yes.
I believe, yeah. So they could very likely run the ball. I made a joke in our group chat that I could imagine Baker throwing like 9 passes. I just remember that Kirk Cousins, I think it was last year, Kirk Cousins week 1 outing where they won and he threw under 10 passes or something. I kind of imagine a very similar scenario. If that doesn't unfold, there's definitely room for somebody like Anthony Schwartz to blow up on one single play in the first quarter, off play action or whatever, because, there's really nobody that the Houston Texans can put back there to defend anybody's deep ball. So I think Anthony Schwartz is definitely in consideration, but we talked about it like it's more of a GPP play in DFS. And I think Donovan Peoples-Jones maybe deserves to be sprinkled amongst some lineups as well. But I definitely don't think we're ranking these guys too high or considering them in season long yet. And I think Jarvis Landry might be the only play from that passing game we should be looking at, because even Njoku and Austin Hooper are splitting time in that tight end room.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily start him, but I am definitely acquiring David Njoku where I can. Just a former first-round pedigree, mega athlete, got some really good work this past week, actually tied for the team lead in targets with 5. And so did Anthony Schwartz, though. I love that call by you, Ty, because Anthony Schwartz was a speedster coming out of college. Yeah, and he's kind of something that this offense doesn't have, right? And he had 3 catches last week for a very nice 69 yards, I might add, on 5 targets to share the lead with Jarvis and David Njoku. So, we're a little trepidatious just because this isn't necessarily the passing game that you want to attach to, but there are some pieces that could give you some good weeks. And especially in your tight end premium leagues, I picked David Njoku up wherever I could, because if he's getting 5 targets a game, he got a couple of red zone targets as well. That could lead to some tight end 1 weeks in the flex if you're hurting for somebody. So I think that's kind of a good way to attack the Browns. More wide receivers, man. They're dropping like freaking flies, and I don't like it, especially for this guy, and that's Jerry Judy in Denver. 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Those are notoriously nasty to deal with and come back from, especially for a wide receiver who has to plant. Who are you attacking? Like, do you think this bumps Courtland Sutton, or do you think it more just bumps the guys behind Jerry Judy?
Like, I think it gives a slight bump to all the weapons. Like, Courtland Sutton is now the clear number 1 while Judy is out. There's no doubt. I'm just not sure he doesn't end up like a bit overranked in a lot of weeks here coming up, or at least in tough matchups in particular. Like, he struggled against James Bradberry in week 1, pure and simple. Courtland Sutton was in a bad matchup against James Bradberry. But Noah Fant, I think he might get a couple more looks. Even the Noah Fant, like, if you look at AOK, there's another tight end who's splitting with Noah Fant. Like, he was out there quite a bit. And AOK might be what keeps Fant from like taking that big step in fantasy terms, like a breakout season that we were kind of hoping for. So the guys we're left talking about here with Jerry Judy out is Tim Patrick, lest we forget. I mean, he did score more fantasy points than Jerry Judy last year. He was the leading wide receiver in Denver in that column, and his 6 touchdowns led the team last year as well. And we think this team could maybe score more this year with this advantageous strength of schedule. Tim Patrick's also like smack dab in the middle because he was an older prospect. So he's like in his prime. He's like 27 or 28 years old. And I love me some KJ Hamler, but I just go back to this offense is still just not really built to like unleash his skill set. You know what I mean? I don't think the 100%. Game scripts are going to necessarily be there either. But he also dropped a deep ball touchdown that he just should have had in week 1 right off that was just a wild one. I thought he could have had that one, but the Broncos have a pretty soft strength of schedule. They looked good in week 1. So how many times are they going to be forced to try that play? Right. So I think Hamler will definitely be a boomer bust option, like Trav. How startable do you think those guys are with no bye weeks, very few injuries to deal with after week 1? Are you thinking of Tim Patrick, Hamburglar as like waiver ads, or, could they sniff lineups in like 3 wide receiver flex leagues?
I think if anyone's going to sniff my lineup, it would be Tim Patrick over KJ Hamler, but I would be trying not to have to start one of those guys if I could. But Tim Patrick could see some snaps for sure and some targets, especially with Judy going out, because Judy was being targeted pretty heavily. He had 7 targets before he went down in that game. And I think Tim Patrick could step into some of that. But I'd be trying not to start them. I think, like you said off the hop there, that the real beneficiary could be Noah Fant, because behind Jerry Judy on the team, Noah Fant played the most snaps in the slot. And I think that's kind of set to increase with Jerry Judy gone. And Noah Fant also tied Jerry Judy with the team lead in 7 targets. So I think that's going to go up as well. So I think that's really nice for fans, even if AOK is playing more, because they had a really, for what I thought they were going to do coming in, I thought they had a really high 12 personnel rate. I can't remember exactly what it was. I put a tweet out, but I can't remember exactly what Denver's rate was. But after that injury, they really pivoted to the 12 personnel. And I think that's good for both of these guys. So, kind of like an Njoku situation where Njoku's the athletic guy behind the main guy. But the thing with Denver is Noah Fant is way more athletic than Austin Hooper, right? So I think Denver's offense is just super versatile still, even without Jerry Judy. But Noah Fant's the biggest beneficiary for me.
Yeah, like I think Tim Patrick and Hamler might be like a floor versus ceiling debate. You know what I mean? Like, what are you looking for in that start when, but I think this is a little premature before bye weeks and injuries and stuff, 100%. Pile up. But the other thing I think is, number one, I think the Jerry Judy injury is just further incentive for Denver to run the ball. And the Broncos have the Jaguars this week on the schedule, the Jets the following week. So Javonte Williams is definitely like Javonte is my top target over the next 2 games. At least, Melvin Gordon maybe as well, but I do want Pookie over Melvin Gordon. I know that's a bit of a conversation after Melvin Gordon did come out and put up an RB1 outing in week 1, but Javonte actually outsnapped, had more carries than Melvin Gordon as well. And just to go back to like the reason that I think we want Tim Patrick over Hamler is because Hamler and Noah Fant are kind of cannibalizing each other in the slot there. And so Hamler's somewhat limited, I think, in snaps. Like, he can kick outside, but Tim Patrick can basically only play outside. So I think there's a complex there at work as well. And AOK is definitely involved. I mean, he saw multiple targets inside the 10-yard line in week 1, one of the only tight ends to do so. So I think a lot of these guys are not quite on the fantasy radar. We're just monitoring the situation, but target and buy high maybe on someone like Javonte Williams heading into the stretch.
Yeah, 100%. I think even if I'm a contender, I might put a feeler out there on Melvin Gordon, especially like in a dynasty league. If you can get him for like a little bit less than, say, his week 1 production, obviously, like if you can play off the fact that he is a descending asset for dynasty leagues,
and a universal sell after week 1 too.
Exactly. Yeah. And people are going to want to try and be getting out. But I think if I'm a contender, I like what they did. And I think they're going to run that ball. So I think you're going to get some production from Melvin Gordon. I actually have him as my running back 21 for this week, where I have Javonte as my running back 27. So I think he might just get a little edge in those goal line work. And he broke off a big one last week, man. Melvin Gordon's not fully washed. So I've always kind of had a soft spot for Melly G, because when he was putting up running back 1 weeks, I was winning titles, baby. Couple more on the Darnell docket here for injuries, Ty, and then we're going to get into trend spotting. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been put on IR and is expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks with a hip subluxation. So for old man Fitzmagic, the hip issues are no surprise. What's your take on Taylor Heineke stepping into the role for Washington? What do you think of the Cam Newton rumors as well?
Yeah, I mean, we heard those in the off season as well, so I'm not like super tied to it. It's definitely like a wait and see what happens on Thursday night situation, I would imagine, because they don't have much of a choice because of how quick this turnaround is. Because the Washingtons play the Giants tomorrow night, so it's been hard, honestly, to keep track of the starting quarterbacks in Washington since Cousins left in free agency. So. Like Taylor Heineke, I think is more interesting than people are giving him credit for in fantasy football in Superflex leagues, just because he does add with his legs. I actually think he plays a lot like Ryan Fitzpatrick, actually, or he at least looked a lot like Ryan Fitzpatrick against the Bucs in the playoffs last year. I was really impressed by that performance. Heineke is a back-end quarterback too, I would say. I might actually start him over guys like Matt Ryan or somebody who there's rankings that would make me look twice, I think, or laugh at how fast things can change in an NFL season. But yeah, speaking of things changing, like, what do you think this does to the weapons, like with the offense in Washington? Because like my feelings on Taylor Heineke for fantasy and real life are very different. No doubt this, like I said, is a huge opportunity, like to live the biggest job interview of your life. But like, how much are you downgrading this offense and some of the weapons, because the schedule isn't very friendly for Washington either?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely would bring the passing weapons down a little bit. Like, I don't think Logan Thomas is necessarily like top 5 tight end material for me anymore without Fitzpatrick. Terry McLaurin I still love because that guy is like a transcendent talent. I checked the game splits on RotoViz, and he only has one game with Taylor Heineke to the tune of like 5 targets or something like that and 64 yards or something. So it's not like any sample size that you can hang your hat on with chemistry between those two. But I think Terry McLaurin's probably going to be fine. Might just lose a little bit of ceiling with Taylor Heineke. Maybe you know what? Taylor Heineke's not going to make
He's
any
never
more
had
mistakes.
A quarterback either. I just think
exactly.
One thing we said about Terry is this guy throughout his college career even is just not had a quarterback. Honestly, Trav, with Terry, I'm more worried. Like I'm not too worried about a quarterback change. I'm more worried about the scripted plays a team game plans for. I was just shocked that Terry McLaurin had 0 targets in the first half of their game in week 1. That's unacceptable. And I'll be extremely angry if that happens tomorrow night.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure to send off a strongly worded email if it does happen again, because somebody will need a talking to about that for sure.
Antonio Gibson, move Antonio Gibson up. Exactly. I think that would be my other Washington takeaway. Yeah, because he looks great. He did fumble. Did he fumble twice? I think he lost one that was a pretty pivotal fumble. But he was used as almost a bell cow back, and I think they have less incentive with a mobile quarterback now in Taylor Heineke to be dishing off to J.D. McKissic or even protecting him to go deep. I think we could see more use in the passing game from someone who's playing more on third down in Antonio Gibson.
Totally. Yeah, I've got him showing 2 fumbles, but 20 carries. He had 5+ targets. J.D. McKissic did not get very much work at all in that backfield. So I think it's Antonio Gibson's and Taylor Heineke being young just further cements that they're going to want to insulate that quarterback with a strong running game and running back. I think, we might see a little bit more J.D. McKissic and Antonio Gibson in the field at the same time. But I don't hate that at all. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm going for this offense. Is I'm just loving on some Antonio Gibson a little more. The last one, Ty, and this is going to lead us into our trend spotting segment. So I will transition right into there shortly after. But that is Raheem Mostert and the San Francisco 49ers. Mostert had that ankle injury. Knee injury, and he was expected to just be out for a few weeks or something, but then he came out and said he's getting surgery and his season's going to be done. So what was looking promising for Raheem Mostert in a season where he was coming back from a little bit of injury, as he always is, I guess, is no more for Raheem the Dream, the Mostert Tiger. But there's opportunity abounds for these other guys, because Elijah Mitchell came in and had a great week this past week against Detroit. We saw a little bit of Jermichael Hasty. And then, of course, we got Trey Sermon, who was a healthy scratch, kind of inexplicably, but we expect him to come back and have some relevance in this offense as well. So what are you making of this? Because people were spending a ton of fab on Elijah Mitchell. Were you in that camp, or do you think that's a little bit hasty?
Nah, I'm kind of lukewarm on it. And actually, I'll circle back to the running backs here. I just wanted to bring one thing up about Ayuk, because I think him and I think there's some pertinent information that applies to, the Trey Sermon situation. Like, I think him and Brendan Ayuk might have experienced some disciplinary action. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but I'm not buying the hamstring issue for Ayuk. He hasn't been limited when he was limited in practice before. Snap-wise, he didn't play all first quarter, and I know some people are bringing up Dante Pettis. Let's not trigger each other like that. I think it's kind of an unfair comparison, but he was also doghoused after in year 2 hard after a really impressive finish to his rookie season. But the point there is that Shanahan has a doghouse, and it is big. And so for Ayuk, I think we're sitting Ayuk this week, and we're going to start Debo. Like, Debo was the big takeaway, I think, from week 1. He saw 60% of the team's air yards, and half his targets came off play action, which we know is just deadly in San Francisco. And the play action is deadly because teams are so scared of the run against San Francisco, no matter who the running back is there, because of the system, because of the scheme, because of the offensive line. So I think this backfield, for the time being, heading into week 2, is fucked. And the beat reporters in San Francisco are fucked. I'm really angry with them as well. Like, how they didn't do, I don't know where they were. All these beat reporters, nobody could give us any reports, but the takeaways here for me is that it is a committee, right? No matter what happens, it will be a committee. Elijah Mitchell, I think, is an RB2 or a flex play this week in a tougher matchup against Philly. And he has a wide range of outcomes. Like, this kid has a very wide range of outcomes in week 2 and going forward. Like, it's certainly, like, we all loved Elijah Mitchell during the draft process. He fell a little bit in the draft, but the 49ers was a great landing spot. I think the Mostert comparisons are a little silly. And the other concerns just stem, like, it goes back to the committee, right? Or that the hot hand approach just continues, or that Elijah Mitchell's role changes with Sermon coming back. I think that's my biggest concern. Like, we saw JaMychal Hasty basically operate as the receiving back, but if Trey Sermon comes back in, is he the early down back? Does that make Elijah Mitchell the receiving back? And then where does that leave JaMychal Hasty? Is he still vulturing goal line touchdowns? Because he did have a goal line touchdown run in week 1. So for this week, I have, if I have to start Elijah Mitchell, I will, but I would rank him like the highest. Maybe he's back end RB2, high end RB3. I think Sermon is the guy I'm ranking ahead of JaMychal Hasty, though, for the record. Not considering either guy in my starting lineup. But the point there is that this backfield is fluid and it could continue to change rapidly. And as the season goes on, the big point for fantasy owners is that the lead back for the 49ers could become even more valuable with if Trey Lance gets in there, maybe, or the 49ers strength of schedule that we've talked so much about. Don't forget this, the 49ers in your fantasy football playoffs will get the Bengals, the Titans, the Falcons, and the Texans. Those are like 4 bottom 5 run defenses. So I think we really want to monitor this situation. Elijah Mitchell was somebody I was more willing to spend 25 to 40% of my fab on rather than 50 to 75% like some people. But that goes back to my love for Trey Sermon, I think.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where I sit too, because I think there's even a world that this week Trey Sermon is the leading ball carrier for the San Francisco 49ers. I just think, like, if it was a doghouse situation, maybe they built up that trust on him on the field where he can get that role right off the hop. They're confident in him. We'll have to see what happens at practices and things like that, see where he's running. But I think there's that world. So I think those people who spent all that fab on Elijah Mitchell are just going to be disappointed because it's going to be rotational for these guys. We already know there's minimal pass catching for the running backs here. I think there was 1 running back reception for JaMychal Hasty, and that is it for the team. So I think we're banking on that rushing work that's going to be shared between 2 or 3 guys. So while it is a lucrative backfield to have, the chips just haven't necessarily fallen enough yet for me to have a definitive opinion on who I want. But I think long-term, I definitely want Trey Sermon. But much like yourself, this week, if I'm throwing a dart, it's going to be Elijah Mitchell. But I'm not going to be as stoked about it. Like, I'm not going to be like 75% fab stoked about it, like you said, Ty. So I just want to move back to those wide receivers because Debo had that wide receiver, like, deadly wide receiver week. He the air yards is what really surprised me for Debo, and that's where I was wrong coming in to the season. I know it's only 1 game, so maybe that's a bit of an overreaction, but I did not expect and I guess Ayuk being out is a huge factor in that, but I did not really expect that from Debo, especially from week 1. So good on him for that, but I think we might want to pump the brakes on that a little bit. Like, would you put him for the rest of season as a wide receiver 2 with Ayuk probably coming back? And do you think they're both wide receiver 2s for the rest of the season?
Yeah, and honestly, I wasn't too far off that in the pre-draft process. I really like Brendan Ayuk. I really like Deebo Samuel as a wide receiver 3 or 4. I just think Deebo has a lot of durability concerns. That's kind of like, there is only a handful of guys that I might label as injury prone. Deebo's kind of one of them. I hate to be that guy. I've always considered him like, I just don't want this guy because he's going to get hurt. But he was pretty undeniable out there. And I think, he was such a bargain in off seasons, in the off-season drafts that we were doing, that he was hard to fade. So I really like Deebo, and I think, I just elevate him to that wide receiver 2 status, and I'm gonna keep trotting him out there as such until I think that running back market share you brought up is a big deal. Like, if we continue to see a low market share for the running back position, I think that's going to benefit the wide receivers. I think Ayuk does start to see some more of the air yards. Like, I think he kind of dominates at the end of the season when it comes to air yards and deep targets. And I think that'll only increase if when Trey Lance gets in there. So I think a lot of this is maybe short-term buy high scenarios, but Deebo's definitely a guy you want on your roster.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. Okay, I'm going to keep us rolling, Ty. We got a lot of stuff to cover tonight, and I am very excited to get to it. So we talked a little bit of Cowboys there. I just wanted to go real quick on them with Zeke. We kind of broke down the passing game. Zeke did not have a good game there. But he still had over 80% of the team snaps, even though we saw Tony Pollard used in a tantalizing fashion as somewhat of a utility player for them. Are you buying Zeke right now, or are you selling him? Like, do you think he can bounce back from that? Or do you think he's just going to be this frustrating, low efficiency guy? And that's what we have to accept him as.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that Zeke will have big bounce back weeks here in the near future, but the Chargers they're not the easiest defense to go against this week. So he's going to be like a back end RB1. Maybe that's the new perception that we hold for Ezekiel Elliott. And I do think he is heavily tied to his work in the passing game, because we talked a lot during the offseason about the efficiency really coming down and how heavily tied he is to yards before contact when it comes to his yards per carry. Not unlike most running backs, we just learned that Zeke is in that group of guys who is reliant on his situation, like every running back seems to be. And with Lyle Collins set to miss 5 games, that offensive line having some concerns, I think there's a little bit of concern with Ezekiel Elliott, and we need to be ready to at least change our minds when it comes to his ceiling, I think. And I think his ceiling is really directly tied to the work in the passing game. So we need to make sure he doesn't cede that work going forward.
And I think he's going to. I think it's going to happen. They have shown that they actively want to get Tony Pollard involved in this offense. He got some carries, and he got 4 targets to Zeke's 2, and Tony P had 4 receptions for 29 yards. So I think we like what we're seeing there. Tony's getting a little bit unlocked, and
I think my lesson with Zeke here is that, like, I was ready to be like, I'm kind of selling Zeke, especially when the narrative is he's going to bounce back. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? But the other thing is, it's a pretty big tier break. Like, running back has gotten pretty ugly pretty quick in 2021 here. So you get to Ezekiel Elliott. Like, if you have the option to start David Montgomery over him, sure. Like, if you have somebody like Saquon Barkley and you want to play him over him, sure, whatever. Like, these are, I just don't know what to say. Like, you're getting pretty ugly pretty quick there after Ezekiel Elliott. He kind of marks a tier break when you're looking at Chris Carson and guys like that who have their own issues, even Najee Harris and guys like that who, I have ranked right around him this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Zeke as the running back 12 on the week, with Najee just ahead of him, Chris Carson 2 spots behind him. So I think you put him right in that little sweet spot where he should be. And I'm kind of buying the dip a little bit, Ty. I just think like the carry volume is gonna come up a little bit. He had 11 carries, but they were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who can score pretty much at will. Like, that offense is so good that Dallas had to fight fire with fire and go to that passing game. So I don't think he's going to be getting 25 totes a game, but I think he comes up into like that 17 to 20 area more often than not. And I think he's going to be fine. So let's just settle a little bit on Zeke, because he is still kind of one of those back end top 12 running backs. Just don't necessarily expect that running back 1 overall weekly ceiling, unless we see Tony fall off in that passing game, like you said. But next one, Ty, we talked a little bit of the Niners, and we're going to stick in the NFC West for this one. going to the Arizona Cardinals, and we saw like some interesting things develop in this offense. Christian Kirk had a blow-up game, who's somebody that I previously dogged. Rondale looked nice on limited work. Nuke looked like Nuke, a couple tutties for him. And AJ Green even had a few targets that he did very little work on. So, what's old is new again. I want to zero in on this backfield, though. James Conner and Chase Edmonds were almost an even split as far as snaps, and James Conner out-carried him, and obviously Chase Edmonds got a few targets there. What do you make of this? Like, do you want either of these guys, or are you avoiding this backfield just because of what that split looks like?
No, I was saying in the offseason, I kind of want both of these guys. I think they can both be fantasy viable, even in the same week here and there, because Chase Edmonds is so, he has a lot of utility on a football team, in my opinion. He's definitely the back you want to start out of these two. Like, he's a guy I think you can plug in as a flex play every week, because he'll be catching passes. He played all the 2-minute offense snaps. Like James Conner did out carry Edmonds, but Edmonds was the guy who went over 100 yards from scrimmage, right? I think James Conner can be an RB3 in a lot of weeks in my rankings. There's no doubt. I just don't know how much higher his ceiling is absent, a touchdown or two in that week, which is really hard to predict. But Chase Edmonds is an RB2 or a really awesome flex play, I think, each week. Trav, who would you start? Would you start Chase Edmonds or the guy we talked about before this week, Elijah Mitchell?
I think I probably would go with Chase Edmonds just because of that pass catching. But I think I'm kind of shying away a little bit from this backfield, Ty, just because I think they could be a little bit game script dependent there. With that defense looking a lot better, I think they could be up in some games where it's a James Conner week. And if they have to play fast and catch up to a team, then I think it could be a Chase Edmonds week. So I think it's going to be a little bit hard to know when you're going to start these guys, or you might start them and it could be that 50-50 split, right? So I don't know if they're guys that I really want to hang my hat on necessarily, but if in a flex play, but as a running back too, I think I would be looking to acquire elsewhere to beef up that spot, because I don't know if they're going to give us that production that we're going to be happy with, just because I think game script could come into play. That defense looked freaking awesome, man. And I think they could look good all season. It's really, there's a lot of athletes on that defense. It's just super athletic, man.
I also think they could be a boat race offense, though, like a top 5 offense. True. That's also one of the fastest offenses, like running just a ton of no huddle. We've seen their seconds per snap and all these pace per play metrics that just, the Cardinals are dominating the league in. So I think if all goes right, they could really dictate the pace, and the pace they want to play at is fast and score lots. And so I just really want to tie to the system. And it kind of makes me want to talk about this passing game really quick, because Kyler looks like he's just set to cook this year. You mentioned Nuke Hopkins too. Christian Kirk catching 2 touchdowns, but AJ Green was the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. And unfortunately, Rondale Moore was the clear wide receiver 4 in this offense. So how are you treating the passing game behind Nuke Hopkins right now?
Ugh, it sucks, man. Like my heart cannot go after Christian Kirk. You know what I mean? Like I can't buy into him and giving us consistency just because I'm not sure he is that. Like, I don't know, man. He did get the most slot work, and that is lucrative in this offense. I think it's interesting because Rondale Moore was used out of the slot a little bit, but his average depth of target was only 4 yards. And if you look at Christian Kirk's average depth of target out of the slot, and it was 13 yards. So they're being used a lot differently. So I think
Green was under 10.
Yeah, well, and I think if we're talking about Chase Edmonds' targets, I think if anyone's going to siphon those away, it's going to be Rondale Moore as that after the catch weapon. He had 68 yards receiving, and 64 of those were after the catch. I put out a tweet just a little bit ago today when I was looking into some Rondale stuff. He had 14 passing snaps. He ran 14 routes. 11 of those were from the slot, and he got 5 targets on 14 routes. So I think it showed that like when he's in there, he's going to be a piece of this offense. Just a matter of whether he gets in there. And I think Christian Kirk is the biggest kind of roadblock to that, as opposed to AJ Green, because AJ Green's going to play on the outside mostly. So it still remains to be seen. I would be probably looking at picking up Rondale Moore on the cheap. I wouldn't start him by any means. I think in the flex, you could probably start a Christian Kirk this week. I still wouldn't feel too great about it, though, even though he had that big week. It's kind of nuke or bust at this point, with Rondale obviously being that long-term, definitely a dynasty guy for sure. But for 2021, I think it could be a little bit spotty for Rondale with.
Well, I think there's.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. And I think there's 2 sides of that coin when people say, people love the target rates per route run, and I agree. I love that metric as well. But it's a double-edged sword, especially with somebody like Rondale Moore. Like the more he's going to see a target on 20% of his snaps, you know what I mean? Like if he's going to see that many targets per snap, teams will know that when he's on the field, there might be a manufactured touch to Rondale Moore. And this is a spread out offense, but I definitely worry about that. I'm concerned about that. And just to put the numbers out here, this is from Dwayne McFarland's utilization report. AJ Green ran a route 87% of the time on passing plays in Arizona in week 1 compared to 95% for Nuke, 66% for Christian Kirk. So that is really frustrating. When you look at AJ Green, just head against the wall fashion here for fantasy owners. Kirk did see multiple end zone targets. I thought that was kind of interesting. Also 25% of the air yards, which was more than AJ Green. So hopefully the Cardinals staff see the light a little bit quicker than the Bengals staff did last year. And that does make me think Christian Kirk is a super great ad right now. But I feel the same about Rondale Moore because his role can only grow, right? Because this offense has so many wide receivers on the field at the same time. So not really looking to start any of these guys, the ancillary pieces right now. I have zero interest in AJ Green. That's for damn sure. But I will probably rank Christian Kirk as like a wide receiver 5 and Rondale Moore as like a wide receiver 6. And I won't be surprised if we're wanting to start both or either of these guys, Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I think if Rondale continues to do some of the things that he did this past week, I think they'll have to get him in that lineup more. And it was interesting to see that in week 1, the 4 wide receiver sets were down a little bit and the 2 tight end sets were up a little bit for Arizona. So I think Rondale's efficiency and effectiveness could hopefully skew them back into those 4 wide receiver sets, him and Christian Kirk on either side in the slot in certain situations. And like bunch formations with these guys would just be deadly if you get Rondale Moore in there moving around too. So just do it, Cliff. Just do it. I'm going to move us on to the Seahawks here, Ty. Obviously, our boy, Tyler Lockett, locked up a couple touchdowns and water is wet. He left the game and then returned. DK got a score as well. Gerald Everett got a score as well. The backfield was a little bit messy. Carson had a fumble. Penny got banged up again. What's new? So let's start with that passing game, Ty. Like, Gerald Everett, is he kind of a top 12 option for you going forward this season after 1 week, or is that a little bit overreaction central?
Yeah, I'm not quite that high on him, but I think he obviously has that upside each week, and you don't have a better offense to look at and try and bet on a touchdown being scored by somebody than the Seattle offense. Like Russ is just that good when it comes to touchdown rate, when it comes to end zone efficiency, when it comes to deep ball efficiency, when it comes to completion percentage over expectation. Like Russ looks like a great MVP candidate through week 1. We know he was on MVP pace halfway through last year, and you know, we should just probably ride this early season Russ wave. I think he's like my quarterback 3 or 4 this week. I think maybe I have like Lamar and Mahomes from that one game ahead of him. Kyler, actually, thinking of them. Maybe I'd
number 3 for me too. I got Kyler, Mahomes, and then Russ.
Nice. Yeah. So we're on the same page there. Like over Josh Allen, Herbert in a great matchup. Like we want Russ because he's that good. And I think Russ keeps this up definitely because they get the Titans this week. So the Titans couldn't generate any pressure on the quarterback last week. Yeah. So Russ should just be comfy as fuck. I think he just kind of like I would probably rank DK and Tyler Lockett as top 10 wide receivers this week. I'm looking at it. Yeah, I do. And
we are a well-oiled machine, buddy. I've got Tyler Lockett at 8 and DK at 10. Like, fuck.
Oh, wow. So I'm probably like the other way. Like, I do still have DK over Lockett, and Lockett's touchdowns, both those, like, oh my God, they're just so amazing.
Yeah, have some plums. Put Lockett above them. Put Lockett
and
over
a lot of
him.
people, like, while we're on trend spotting, we should talk about, like, a lot of people were talking a lot of quick passing, short passing. That was not the case. Seattle just aired it out in week 1 and looked pretty good doing it. And I think that backfield, like, I'd be picking up Alex Collins, especially in deep leagues, because and maybe even DJ Dallas in your super deep leagues, because Carson fumbles, Penny gets banged up. There's definitely room for somebody to emerge, and a 17-game schedule is a long haul. So I'd definitely be starting to stash someone like Alex Collins.
Yeah, man, I actually dabbled in a little bit of Alex Collins this week on the waiver wire, and you just never know. It's kind of like the Niners backfield where it's okay to grab that second and third option if you've got that bench spot, because the boom that could happen could be really, really big, and we've seen Alex Collins do that before. in the Seattle offense. So I think that's a really good point about these guys. And yeah, nothing else to say really about the passing weapons. I think Lockett and DK are both top 10 weapons, and for the foreseeable future for me, I'm going to be having those guys at least in the top 12. And then Gerald Everett, I'll probably have him at least back end top 12 tight end. Most of the way, as long as we see he continues to be getting this work. So I like that this offense is so condensed. Okay, the next one, man, we are going to Carolina, and the Sam Darnold, Robbie Anderson revenge game. They put it to the Jets a little bit. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is the king. He was the running back one on the week, and Sam Darnold got that revenge. Are you into Sam Darnold in this offense, Ty? I've been in on him. I really like him in this offense. Not like top 12 but put up sufficient games and keep these receiving weapons relevant. What are you thinking about Sammy D?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like he averaged 8 yards per attempt, like he did exact his revenge, but he was up and down, like when you watch the game, right? And he hit the deep ball to Robbie. But the thing about Darno is he gets so much yards after the catch from guys like Christian McCaffrey, guys like DJ Moore. Like there's a lot of yards built into this offense for the quarterback. Plus just so many highly ranked players each week. Like Darno might deserve to be ranked higher, but yeah, I just think victory laps are definitely premature. I mean, I just don't know if Darno is somebody that I'm looking to start even in a super flex league. Like I'm not sure he's going to crack my top 24 in a lot of weeks just because I'm not sure if this offense isn't running entirely almost through Christian McCaffrey, right? Like DJ Moore is still that mid wide receiver 2 for me. I love his upside week to week, maybe not a ton of touchdown upside, but still love me some DJ Moore. I think Robbie Anderson was like the really concerning week 1 takeaway for Carolina though. Not just because I went to bat for him during the offseason pretty hard, but we might have to adjust how he was deployed. Was not great, and just the lack of production in week 1 kind of spoke for itself. Like it sounds strange saying lack of production because he caught a 50, 60-yard touchdown catch.
57 I think.
But I think that was his only catch of the day, which is the first time we've been able to say that during his tenure with the Carolina Panthers. And I think he saw 5 targets in every single game at least last year in Baby Blue in his first year, and he saw 3 targets in week 1. So it just looks like he's more of the deep threat in this offense. Where was maybe we thought Terrace Marshall might play that role. And one of the draws for Robbie last year was, and I thought heading into this year, was the consistency, right? The usage and speed changes, all that stuff. But I am a bit worried, and I am downgrading him after week 1 in terms of like rest of season value. And I'd probably sell if you can get like top 24 prices for Robbie Anderson right now. And I'm not sure, Trav, though, how much of a vote of confidence that is for Terrace Marshall. So like, give me your Darno thoughts or whatever. Like I still like Robbie a lot more than Terrace Marshall is what I'm saying. Robbie's still like a wide receiver 3 in my eyes with some upside with that high variance spiked week potential. Terrace Marshall, I think, is at best like a risky flex play for me still, like in that Elijah Moore range. Maybe you like, what do you think about the Broncos guys we talked about? Would you start Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, or would you roll Terrace Marshall out there if you had to?
Ooh, let me just peep the matchups here. So Denver has Jacksonville. That's juicy. And then where's against New Orleans? So I think I probably would go Tim Patrick over Terrace Marshall, but I think the Terrace Marshall takeover of Robbie Anderson is just inching closer and closer, man. And I don't know if it's necessarily like a straight up take over the role, but if you look, DJ Moore had 5 slot snaps, and Terrace Marshall led this team with 19 snaps out of the slot. So that's like a very defined role that is going to be there in this offense. You know what I mean? And so I think that's really, really good for Terrace Marshall that they trusted him to do that. So I don't know if that's going to really be fantasy relevant from week to week. And I would probably still put Robbie Anderson a little bit over him, but I think he's inching closer to where by midseason, I might be a Terrace Marshall over Robbie Anderson easily guy. And I've loved Robbie Anderson previously, but that's just how much I love Terrace Marshall, especially in this offense. I would go Terrace Marshall over Elijah Moore, especially this week, just because the offense is a lot better and New Orleans probably is going to put some points up against Carolina. So while the matchup's a little bit tough, I think we see some of that coverage shadowing DJ Moore and even probably Robbie Anderson over Terrace Marshall. So this could be a good spot for Terrace Marshall, actually. So you know what? Terrace Marshall over Tim Patrick this week, Ty. Fuck it. I'm doing it.
I like. That's what I was thinking. I'm starting Terrace Marshall over those 2 guys, I think. Yeah.
I like it. Very, very good. I think that's pretty good because CMC is the running back one and water is wet, and we're not even thinking about the guys behind him necessarily.
I tweeted out, I have to say, I tweeted out the other day, running backs averaging 18 fantasy points per game in PPR over the last 2 years, like since the beginning of 2019. Christian McCaffrey's averaging about 30 points per game. Next closest is Dalvin Cook at 22.4. And then down at like fifth is Austin Eckler at 18 points per game. Like he's literally giving you like a 10-point advantage over the last couple of years over the running back 5 or so. Insane. That is insane.
Christian McCaffrey is something that we have never seen in fantasy before, I don't think. But one thing that I'm going to see pretty soon coming in the mail, Ty, is a brand new championship belt from Trophy Smack. So I want to give a little bit of love to our sponsors, Trophy Smack, because I was a part of the Kings Classic League that Bob Lung puts on. Thanks to Bob for all of his work that he does there. But one of the perks of winning that league is that I'm getting a really cool championship belt from Trophy Smack. You've seen them on Twitter. They're incredible. If you want to get some hardware for your league and level up your championship winnings, I think you need to go to Trophy Smack. So if you go and use our promo code TNFF and buy a belt or a championship trophy, which are also just incredibly sharp looking, you will get a free championship ring with our promo code. So make sure you go over to Trophy Smack there. Matt and the whole team is doing really, really good work and kind of helping us take our leagues to the next level. I've got a live draft that I do every year, and we're getting a belt done up for that. And I cannot wait to win it and be able to walk my picks up with a belt around my waist and just rub it in my friends' faces. So shout out to the boys in that league. They know who they are, and I will be hopefully rocking some hardware next season, courtesy of Trophy Smack. So again, any of our listeners, go check it out. They're just kind of the best in the business if you want to get hardware. They got all sorts of stuff. They got losers trophies. They got draft boards for draft season as well, which is really, really cool. So go check them out. That promo code is TNFF, and you get a free championship ring with the purchase of a championship trophy or a title belt. So rock the hardware with Trophy Smack. Alrighty, Ty. So now that we paid the bills, let's talk about the bills. Josh Allen and the crew did not have the best week against your Steelers this past week. That defense looked incredible, but the Bills did not look like their 2021 self. So right off the hop, are you worried about Josh Allen at all?
Nah, I mean, Josh Allen still had a ton of designed rushing plays, which is a big deal for me. That's how Singletary could still account for less than half of the team's rush attempts on a low volume run team with Zach Moss out. Devin Singletary actually really quick, just an off, he did look really good, especially in the fourth quarter. He did fumble twice though, even though you didn't lose either of them. That's just, I think, important to remember because Zach Moss was inactive. And by the by, I know negative game script, blah, 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 but the Bills passed the ball 73% of the time. Almost all of those targets went to the wide receiver position. So not worried about Josh Allen. And there's a lot of ambiguity in this wide receiver room, but I just kind of want all the Bills wide receivers. You know what I mean? Gabe Davis is interesting. I think he would be the one that is going to generate a lot of conversation. He also got banged up at the end of this game, but his usage was good and bad. He was in at the goal line for multiple snaps. That's where he scored his touchdown, but he was so clearly the wide receiver 4 in the offense behind Diggs, behind Beasley, behind Emmanuel Sanders, looking at snaps, looking at route run participation, targets even. But Beasley and Gabe Davis, they split the total team's end zone targets. They were definitely involved in that area of the field. I think Gabe Davis also saw an average depth of target over 17. Emmanuel Sanders' average depth of target was over 20.
I know. I saw. Yeah. I was just going to say that was the coolest part. I was digging through all the Bills stuff, and I saw your boy Ty, Emmanuel Sanders, with a 20.3 average depth of target, and I was like,
buy lows. Bud. Well, I think he is kind of a screaming buy. For fantasy, I would consider Beasley kind of the solid wide receiver 4 guy with definitely upside from week to week. When the Bills aren't playing the Steelers, who were playing too high and getting home, rushing just 4, that high average depth of target, that route participation for Emmanuel Sanders, that's going to lead to some blow up weeks. And even Gabe Davis is very much involved in the game plan.
Totally. Manny Sanders was my biggest takeaway from the passing game in general. Is just that he is what you said he was going to be, Ty, and he's going to be, I think, the second wide receiver option in this offense. So I love that. And just to circle back to Josh Allen, he's going to be fine, like you said. Like it was a fairly low scoring game for the most part, and he still threw the ball 51 times. He threw for just under 500 air yards, Ty, and the only person who had more than him this past week was Derek Carr, who had an extra quarter to play with against the Baltimore Ravens. So he's going to be just fine. Let's not be too hard on Josh Allen for a tough game against a tough defense, because that Steelers defense looks absolutely deadly, buddy. So I'm sure that's nice for you as a Steelers fan. Yeah, I think like this backfield's also a tough one to shake out. I just think we don't really want these pieces, right, Ty? Like I'm not necessarily that in on Zach Moss. If you have them, I'm holding just because I don't think I'm going to get much for them, both Singletary and Moss. And then if they have a blow up game or something like that, then you sell them big time. But we don't see a lot of targets. We don't even see a lot of carries. You said it's over like 70% of their plays were passing plays. Then you factor in the 9 rushing attempts that Josh Allen had, and that's about 80+% of the plays that are not going to the running backs. So I think it's just not a very lucrative backfield, which is unfortunate, because I think if they made a concerted effort to do it, they totally could be.
Yeah, and they might in some matchups in some second halves for sure, when they're not playing a Steelers team that kind of gets out in front of them or force them to make some mistakes.
Yeah. So we're going to go to La La Land and talk about them Chargers. They play the Dallas Cowboys this week, which I think is a really nice get-right game after playing that tough Washington defense this past week. The Chargers came out with the last-minute win, which has been quite the opposite of what's happened for that team over the past few years. They've had some serious freaking heartbreak, that team. So it was nice to see them with Justin Herbert going into his second season, get that win from a real football standpoint. But what are you making of this offense, Ty? Like Mike Williams had a buttload of targets. The weirdest thing, Austin Eckler had a buttload of carries in like near the goal line, but a zilcher in the target categories. Why don't you start with the passing weapons? Is Mike Williams a guy that we can put in our wide receiver 3 spot and be confident about at this point?
Oh yeah, I think Mike Williams is definitely the big takeaway in the passing game. Like he's a wide receiver 3 for fantasy, especially with the Cowboys on the schedule, who are very susceptible to the deep ball. There's nobody on that defense who can cover Mike Williams. But even in a prime matchup, I'm probably still starting guys like Brandon Cooks, Jamar Chase, your boy Devontae Smith might be someone I'm starting over Mike Williams still. So I'm not like ready to say that this guy's like a must start. Guys like that I still want over Mike Williams, even when Mike Williams is in like a golden matchup. Eckler was the one who had like a strange outing, right? Like, and remember, he was playing through a hamstring injury as well. But it was weird because he got all the team's goal line carries, 100% of them. But yeah, the 0 catch is just bizarre. And another kind of anomaly is that according to Pro Football Focus, nobody had more 10 zone carries than Austin Eckler's 4 in week 1, and Justin Herbert also had 4. But Eckler saw just 10 carries from inside the 10 in 2020 and just 11 the year before when he delivered like a high-end fantasy football performance for owners. So this usage in close is super encouraging for Austin Eckler. It's one of the parts of the puzzle for the pitcher that we would want to put on display for Austin Eckler having a top 5 running back season, I think. And in my opinion, the catches will definitely come. Maybe Anthony Lynn propped up the running back market share a little bit, but Eckler has been a revelation in the passing game, like a stud. So I expect week 1 to be the outlier in terms of the pass catching work. Like he's a clear running back 1, I think, for fantasy going forward, a guy you could buy high on maybe. Justin Herbert, I thought just really interesting. He did have 4 carries from inside the 10-yard line and didn't score on any of them, even though all 5 of his rushing touchdowns last year came on his 14 carries from inside the 10-yard line. So I think he's like my quarterback 6 or 7 this week going against Dallas. And with the matchup, I think Herbert, like for DFS, has quarterback 1 overall upside this week. What do you think about Austin Eckler, though? Do you think he is a buy high guy?
Yeah, I think like you definitely could. And I don't even know if you'd be buying high at this point off that 0 targets, right? Like somebody might be in panic mode. So if you can go get Austin Eckler, you hammer that, because
I just mean he's going to be expensive. Like, would you pay
absolutely up? Yeah, I think I might actually. I think I might, because if we see that goal line work, which is what's hindered him his entire, and not even hindered him because he still puts up killer seasons. That's what's kept me a little bit hesitant on Austin Eckler, was the rushing work and the rushing work near the goal line. But if we're seeing that, man, he's easy top 12 option. And like you said, the guy averaged like 10 targets per game with Justin Herbert previous to that. So last season, and that's like a 10-game sample size or something, I think. So he's going to get those, and he's going to be up near the target leader for running backs at the end of the season. So I'm not shook about that. And if you add all that goal line work where you can punch in some extra touchdowns, I think that only cements him as the top 12 option with probably like weekly running back one overall upside. So I'm loving me some Austin Eckler, and I'm also pumping the brakes a little bit on Mike Williams. I think you can definitely slot him in because the way he plays above the rim, you only need 2 or 3 targets for him to put up a decent fantasy week. And I think he's got a pretty elite quarterback throwing him the ball. But if, we got Jared Cook had 8 targets. Jalen Guyton had 5 targets. So I think there's some guys that Justin Herbert likes on this team. So I don't think we can expect 12 targets for Mike Williams weekly. But I think he's more of that kind of boom or bust option where the booms are going to be really nice for us. Yeah, and I don't think I'm investing in Jalen Guyton just because I think it's going to be a little bit iffy with him and Josh Palmer and those targets that Jared Cook saw. It looks like Jared Cook's going to be heavily involved in this offense as well. Yeah. So yeah, definitely buy him because everybody just thinks he's dust, but you could be getting yourself a top 12 tight end this year. So if you didn't invest in the draft, maybe the injury bug or whatever might have hit. Jared Cook's a nice little buy for 2021. Oh, like, totally.
I hate Jared Cook, but buy Jared Cook in fantasy.
Water, yeah. Okay, this one's going to be all you, buddy. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Najee Harris had 100% of the snaps. Not a very efficient game on all those snaps, but
I think it was the worst ever. Rich Rebar tweeted something about it being the worst of any running back since 2012 or something that had 100% snap rate for fantasy.
I think it even went back further to like 2005 or something like that, So I think it's pretty safe to say that we should probably be trying to buy a Najee if at all possible. There's got to be better days ahead for him, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there's some concern about that ultimate ceiling, right? That's what we were talking about once he started to move up into that, almost that first round of fantasy drafts. But I still love Najee Harris. I think passing game work is the key, and that's why I am buying on Najee Harris. Like, he saw multiple targets inside the 10-yard line, which is, there was only like 6 or 7 guys who did that in week 1. So the passing game is kind of where I'm buying Najee and I'm still kind of selling the passing game. Like, not a lot's changed for me, I guess, after 1 week in Pittsburgh. Like, it looked a lot like we thought it would, the passing game, with Big Ben kind of being all over the place as usual, but the play action rate was pretty encouraging. And I think like Deontay and Claypool, like, I thought it was interesting that Juju was kind of the wide receiver 1 when it comes to route participation and snaps and stuff. So maybe that's just a little bit Deontay being banged up a little bit, and he was still the highest targeted player. So I think we have to be water a little bit in this wide receiver room. Like, I actually don't love any of these guys at cost. Probably, I kind of expect them all to be in that 25 to 30% range for air yards, just kind of cannibalizing each other with some disparities. A little bit more volume for Deontay and Juju compared to Claypool, but I think I probably still want Claypool because especially this week playing the Raiders, who I expect to be terrible against the pass, terrible against the deep ball, terrible against play action, terrible against guys who can generate yards after the catch. Like, they just miss tackles galore. And so, for this week, I think Deontay is like a solid wide receiver 2, no doubt. And I think he will be for most weeks because of the floor he comes with in Deontay Johnson. Claypool I like as like a juicy flex almost every week, but he could probably sniff wide receiver 2 conversations and rankings like this week, or at least, maybe someone I target in DFS for GPPs. Because Claypool has a really high ceiling against the Raiders this week. Then there's Juju, who I guess is a wide receiver 3 or flex play against the Raiders, but I just couldn't be more bored of Juju Smith-Schuster because I didn't even throw him in that Mike Williams conversation, but he's right around there in my rankings, probably like Devontae Smith, Cooks, all those guys. Like, I want all those guys in my lineup over Juju because, they offer so much more upside. And then, there are wide receiver 3 or 4s anyway. So that's what I'm chasing out of that guy. So a lot of rambly thoughts on the Steelers, but basically I feel a lot in the way that we felt preseason. And I think they'll run more plays on offense in week 2. They just had kind of a really low play volume game.
No, yeah, I think that's a fair assessment too. Like I was definitely on Juju. I thought there was a world where, they could get him down the field a little bit more as far as his average depth of target, but that remains to be seen because his average depth of target this past week was a whopping 6.6 yards. It was actually better than Deontay Johnson. Deontay got 10 targets though and got the touchdown as well. So I think it goes Deontay, Claypool, and Juju for me, Ty, whereas previously I probably would have been Juju as the second option with Claypool as the boomer bust third option, but they still like to use Claypool creatively. I think he got a carry in that game. So I think
he's running routes on like over 80% of the snaps, like, which is way
He's just juicy. He's just a juicy guy. And an interesting note on Najee, I'm looking at PFF right now, and he ran the second most routes on this team behind Juju. He ran 30 to Deontay and Claypool's 29. So I think that's just encouraging for Najee that better days are probably ahead. And I think he can hit some of that ceiling, which we might be questioning as well.
Okay, so speaking of ceiling, let me kind of serve this one up to you because I see the Eagles are next here, and they get the win over Atlanta on the back of Jalen Hurts and their most recent 2 first-round picks. So why don't I give you a little rapid fire with like Devontae Smith? Do you think he's a wide receiver 3 with upside?
Oh yeah, I think he's got to be a weekly wide receiver 3. I think he's getting near. And obviously after one game, that's a little bit much, but it's very clear that he is going to be the main target on this team. And I think he's near back end top 24 wide receivers for me. If they can continue to improve on what they did this past week and do some of the things that I saw them do, which I was pleasantly freaking surprised. Nick Sirianni, thank you. But yeah, I think Devontae is probably almost pushing top 24 for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I was a little off Devontae Smith. So, in the offseason at cost, but I'm definitely coming around. I'll say that. It was against Atlanta, so I want to see it again but it might be too late at that point. Let's put it that way. Yeah. What is Jalen Reagor?
I think he's got to be a wide receiver 4 with upside. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to be heavily targeted. I think Devontae Smith is going to be, whatever heavily targeted in this Eagle offense is going to be. I think Devontae is going to be it. But I think Jalen could have some of those pop-off weeks, right? He's really good after the catch. They showed that they are going to want to use these weapons after the catch. 13 of Jalen Hurts' 35 passing attempts came behind the line of scrimmage in week 1 against Atlanta. So I think that just speaks to letting these guys get in some space and do some work. And I think that plays right into Jalen's game, but I just think it's going to have to be a low volume, high efficiency kind of production profile for Jalen Reagor, for lack of better words, because I don't think we're going to be seeing like 6, 7, 8 targets per game. I think it's just going to be very spotty where he gets that. So I'm not necessarily going out and acquiring Jalen Reagor, but if I have him, I could put him in my flex as somebody who very well could disappoint me in the same vein that he could have a boom winning week.
And they're sure using the running backs in the passing game, so that, behind the line of scrimmage stat doesn't surprise me. And Hurts, I think, only had 1 pass travel 15 yards or further downfield. So, thinking of my Boston Scott call, my apologies, everybody. I was just trying to predict, the lack of assuming rational coaching, because we did like Kenny Gainwell and we love the skill set that he offers. So are you going out and buying Kenny Gainwell right now?
I think you could, man. Like, I think he got some usage. He got some red zone work. He punched in a red zone touchdown. He got 3 targets to Miles Sanders' 4. So I think they want to get him involved in this offense, and they showed that they trust him in situations. He was predominantly in there in 2-minute situations at the end of the half. So they really trust Kenny Gainwell. More so than I expected. I thought it was going to be Boston Scott, and then Kenny Gainwell kind of slowly works himself into that second role, but we didn't see much Boston Scott whatsoever. So Kenneth Gainwell is the second running back, but I think I'm just kind of, for me, it just confirmed that Miles Sanders can be kind of that top 15 running back if they continue on this route. But I think the running backs in this offense are going to be ones that we kind of want for fantasy. Where are you sitting? Because I know you loved Kenny Gainwell coming out, and you even liked him to have some standalone value later in the season after he maybe usurped Boston Scott. But what are you thinking as far as that backfield now, Ty?
Yeah, I really like Gainwell, and if Miles Sanders was to miss any time, I think he could have huge league-winning upside. I think the offensive line,
he missed practice today, actually.
Yeah, with an ankle or something. Yeah. And I like the who is that ex-rugby guy on the offensive line for Philadelphia?
Jordan Mailata just signed a big deal.
Yeah, I really like what's going on in that offensive line. So if they can stay healthy, I think there's a lot of upside for whoever the lead back is. And I think we're going to see a lot of running back market share, which I wasn't necessarily expecting with Jalen Hurts. So I think game script might have fed some of that, like some of the easy passing work that we saw, but it was definitely encouraging. And I think Kenny Gainwell being so involved and just super definitively being ahead of Boston Scott just makes him a buy, because I was interested in Boston Scott just knowing how, much of a committee we could see in Sirianni's system with Miles Sanders as the lead guy.
No, yeah, I like that. And just kind of like I said, Ty, I think we're just going to want pieces. And Kenneth Gainwell was a running back that probably should have gone higher than the 5th round. I think the Eagles were pretty thrilled to get him there, and they're just kind of showing that he's going to use him. I think another guy who kind of cemented himself for me a little bit was Dallas Goedert as well, Ty. He had a red zone touchdown and just kind of showed that he can be that option. We talk about Yak and them scheming up for yards after the catch. I think Dallas Goedert's probably one of the best after the catch tight ends in the NFL already. And then if he can add red zone work to that, which they've shown they're going to give him, couple in the fact that Zach Ertz got a little banged up in that game, and I think he missed practice today as well. I think Dallas Goedert slots in as a top 8 tight end for me in that offense, because I think Jalen Hurts is going to target him as a bit of a safety blanket, and I was very thankful to see that Goedert is still involved, even with Ertz being active for the most part. So are you in on Goedert? I know there was a little bit of trepidation as we were coming into the season with Zach Ertz being active and looking like he was going to be a big piece of this offense, or are you in on Goedert?
Well, also, I believe in that whole relationship between running back targets and tight end targets a lot of the time. So those short area targets. So you see a lot of targets going to the running back position. Hard to imagine also a lot of targets going to the tight end position, even though we have seen that a little bit in Philly, but definitely leaning way more on the spectrum of tight end targets. So I am not sold on Dallas Goedert. Long story short, I still think, he belongs in that like Noah Fant kind of tier, you know what I mean? Where they aren't going to be top 5 tight ends for me ever, but they're going to be in that tight end 5 to 12 range every week where, they're going to rotate, whether I like Logan Thomas or Noah Fant's matchup, or Jonnu Smith gets the Jets this week. I think Rob Gronkowski came out and blew up, and now he has the Falcons. Like, I think tight end is tough. So if you want to have Goddard as a top 8 tight end, sure. If you want to have him as your tight end 12, sure. I don't mind starting Robert Tonyan over Dallas Goedert this week, even though I think I have him ranked like 3 tight end spots lower than Dallas Goedert. So it's tricky. I just don't think we should jump the shark with Dallas Goedert and suggest that he belongs because we've seen some of these other guys like Hawkinson and Kyle Pitts really come out and look like they could actually make that leap into the next category or the next tier. Whereas I don't see that with Dallas Goedert or Noah Fant, just because the limitations in their offense are in the weapons around them.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're definitely not saying that the talent isn't there, because I think it's safe to say that the talent's definitely there for both of them to do that. But yeah, it is the offensive limitations that probably will stop them being there. But I'm getting in on Dallas Goedert a little bit more. I was hesitant as we approached the season. It was a really emotional roller coaster for me with Dallas Goedert this past season, because I was invested in him in like 8th rounds early in the offseason, thinking Zach Ertz is going to be gone. Zach Ertz comes back. My heart's broken. Now Dallas Goedert shows that he can be effective with Zach Ertz, and my heart is whole again. So a bit of a roller coaster for old T-Rav, Ty.
It's a slippery slope. I just think you could go get like an Adam Troutman, who's like seeing a lot more work, so to speak. Like target share is, always a murky thing after 1 week, and when your team only throws 20 times like Jameis did. But Adam Troutman's a guy I might go out and buy because he'll be so much cheaper and might offer the same upside in my eyes. But Dallas Goedert, definitely, if Zach Ertz was to get hurt, or if, even a couple injuries hit that offense in Philadelphia, maybe Goedert could have that top 5 season.
Totally. All right, Ty, we are going to whip a quick segment of I Got 5 on it with Monkey Knife Fight here. Of course, Monkey Knife Fight is our title YouTube sponsor for the TNFF network, our longest running sponsor, and we love doing work with them. We made a little bit of cash last week, Ty. We were 1 for 2 on our props that we laid down. But if anyone else wants to get in there and make some cheddar, you can do that too by signing up at Monkey Knife Fight with the promo code TNFF. What that'll get you is an extra $50 on your initial deposit of $50. So if you drop 50, they'll give you another 50. You got a cool hundy, and you can play on Monkey Knife Fight and make some cash like we are. We're just going to do one this week, Ty. We were we got smoked on touchdown dance this past week, and we are running a little bit long on this epi. So we're just going to do one more or less competition. So what it is basically you get a line for these players, say X amount of receiving yards. You decide if he's going to go more, if he's going to go less. If you hit on both of them, we can multiply our cash money by, in this one, it's 3.6 times because we're only going with 2 props there, but you could get into 8 different player props on one game, and that'll multiply your money by like 100 or 50 or something like that. So you can go out on a limb with a 5 spot, and then you can turn that 5 into 500 if you hit on it. So it's a lot of fun to play on Monkey Knife Fight. Again, that promo code's TNFF, and you'll get an instant match on your first deposit up to $50. Okay, so the Thursday nighter is the one we always zero in on. This isn't the juiciest Thursday nighter. I will be honest, with the Giants and the Washington football team and Taylor Heineken coming in there for a beverage at quarterback. But the first guy we're going to talk about here is Terry McTy. We talked about him a little bit earlier. We think he's quarterback proof. He has shown that. Do you think against the New York Giants that Terry McLaurin will get more or less than 74.5 receiving yards?
That's
a really close line.
74.5. Let's go under, I guess. That's just too high for me, Bob. That's too high, Bob.
I like that. I would probably have gone the same. And how about Sterling Shepard, Ty? He had a big week 1 for the New York Giants, but I don't think I don't think he's the most tantalizing option, and that's probably a product of his offense. But I heard somebody say that number 3, Sterling Shepard, is a far different player than at his previous number. So maybe the single-digit numbers streamlined him a little bit, or maybe Danny Dimes has an easier time seeing the single-digit numbers.
Like him and Daniel Jones. Like, say what you want about Shepard, those two have a connection. Yeah.
So that line for Sterling Shepard against a really good Washington defense is 59.5 receiving yards. That one's tempting. You're going to go under on that one. Okay. Very good. Very good.
I like close, right? Like I think McLaurin probably sees about 70 yards receiving. I think Shepard probably only has like 6 catches for 50 yards. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I think these are pretty close, but that's an easy one where I'd veer towards the under.
Beauty. So it's a 3.6 times multiplier. I know we call this segment, I got 5 on it, but I'm going to drop another 10 on it. So I got 10 on it today. Ty will turn our $10 into $36 tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football. I did forget to tweet it out last week, Ty, so sorry to our listeners who are trying to track that. But get in there, and if you win any cash on Monkey Knife Fight, send us a screenshot. Let's celebrate together, folks. We want to celebrate the W's and making some of that cheddar with Monkey Knife Fight. Okay, Ty, let's we got another quick segment. I don't want to bounce our ranking section or segment because I think there's some really interesting stuff to talk about, but I think we need to rapid fire a little bit. Do you mind if I just rapid fire mine real quick here, Ty, and then you can take the floor?
Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. So my quarterback that I have, and basically what we do is we go into Fantasy Pros and we find the difference between our rank and expert consensus. So if we are a ways off of what the expert consensus is saying, we want to talk about it and say why we are going that route. And the first guy on the docket for me is Tyrod Taylor, quarterback from the Houston Texans. Had a solid week last week, and this week they play the Cleveland Browns. I know Cleveland has a good defense, but I think Tyrod has a little bit of that built-in upside with his legs. He had 4 rushes for 40 yards, and it's funny, I did a little piece saying Tyrod was a guy that you could start, and one of the stats that I cited was that previously he in his starts he had averaged 40 rushing yards per game, and then that's an additional 4 points for you as a fantasy gamer. He got right on the button on that this past week. So I think if you have a floor of 4 fantasy points from his legs, and then you factor in that they have a Garbo defense that is going to get scored on, and Baker and the Browns showed that they can score some points this past week against Kansas City. I think Tyrod's going to have to throw the ball as well, and we know that he likes to take deep shots. So I think Tyrod, I've got him 12 spots higher than ECR, out on a limb at quarterback 13, but I believe in Ty God as a fantasy asset. Next guy, Ty, I did this specifically to pull on your heartstrings, but also because I really, really believe in the matchup and the player this week, Aaron Jones versus Detroit. And this might be a bit of a hot, you know what? This is probably a bit of a hot take, Ty, but he is my running back 1 on the week. I know Christian McCaffrey is the guy.
Hashtag CMC no matter what. Wow.
Yeah, but still, man, I think Aaron Jones is going to have one of those pop-off weeks. Everybody talks about Aaron Rodgers being pissed off. I think this whole team is going going to be pissed off about that performance that they just had against the Saints. And I think that trickles down to Aaron Jones. AJ Dillon and Kylan Hill aren't really worrying me too much. I think they're fighting for ancillary duties. Now, Aaron Jones's snap share wasn't great this past week, but I don't think we expected him to be getting 80% snaps. I think we expected him to be around that 60 to 65 like he had in week 1. And I think the type of player he is, he can pop off for that big week against that terrible Detroit defense. Aaron Jones is my running back 1 for week 2, Ty, and I am fired up for it. I can't wait to see that come to fruition. A couple more. Deandre Swift, I got him 5 spots higher than ECR because he's going to be the main runner. And him and Jamal Williams had, I think, each had 9 targets this past week, and DeAndre Swift, like it gave him 9 targets, and that guy's going to explode against Green Bay, who should be ahead. They should need to pass the ball. Jared Goff threw the ball 58 times last week, and I think DeAndre Swift is going to be a beneficiary of that all season long because Detroit's going to be behind in a lot of games. Elijah Mitchell, I actually have him 12 spots lower than ECR Ty for what we talked about earlier, just that these other guys are going to be involved. Let's not fall into the trap that Elijah Mitchell is going to be getting 20 totes per. And then I got Tyler Lockett, who we talked about. I got him 4 spots higher at wide receiver 8. And then DJ Chark, this isn't like a super high. There we go. Coach Craig in the comments. DeAndre Swift had 12 targets. My apologies. That's even better. DJ Chark, I've got him at wide receiver 39, which is 5 spots higher than ECR. I just think, he didn't get a high volume target share last week, but the guy is going to get at least 3 or 4 deep shots per game with a shitty defense in Jacksonville. So those are some of the guys that I'm a little bit higher on and that I would be confident starting in pivotal roles in my offense for week 2. Fire away, brother.
Yeah, I like a lot of those guys. So I put a couple quarterbacks. I also went a little bit different here, Trav. I didn't necessarily do against ECR. I totally just based on what we were supposed to do. I thought we were doing like kind of surprising rankings. You know what I mean? So I just kind of have a bunch of takeaways from my first, overhaul of week 2 rankings. Russell Wilson, definitely that top 5 quarterback ranking. I just think is something that we could maybe anticipate going forward. Definitely in this Titans matchup. Taylor Heineke, I think you can start in Superflex leagues if you were able to pick him up. 4 of my top 12 wide receivers are Cowboys and Seahawks this week. I think 8 of my top 20 wide receivers come from just 4 teams this week, Trav. And that's the Cowboys with Lamb and Cooper, Seahawks with DK and Lockett, and then the Buccaneers who play Atlanta. I have Godwin and Mike Evans right in that top 20, and Vikings wide receivers who play Arizona. And I think we'll see a lot of play volume. I think that has shootout potential if Kirk Cousins and co can keep up. And so I think Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson belong both in the top 20. Speaking of highly ranked teammates, I have Kareem Hunt ranked really high this week. Like both him and Nick Chubb, I think could finish as top 12 running backs this week or top 15 or whatever. Lower on some guys that we talked about, like Robbie Anderson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Melvin Gordon would make that list for running backs. I do have Javonte over Melvin Gordon, which is very much in, that's contrarian for ECR and everything. I think most people are, 5-6 spots ahead of Javonte with Melvin Gordon. Yep. But Melvin, I'm pretty sure Javonte out-touched and out-snapped Melvin Gordon in week 1. James Robinson, super frustrating, and his low ranking kind of surprises me or angers me. Not sure which one, but definitely angry at Urban Meyer. Just don't understand why they didn't run the ball against Houston. Not sure why they're giving so much touches to Carlos Hyde. Just not sure what the hell is going on there. Speaking of not knowing what the hell is going on with Urban Meyer and his Jaguars, I don't have them figured out. So my wide receivers in that room, like Shenault, Marvin Jones, and DJ Chark, I have all ranked really close to one another. And maybe the play is to have them all as wide receiver 3s or 4s, but I think one of those guys blows up. And I actually think DJ Chark might be the least likely because you are banking on that deep shot hitting. And as much as that might be there late in games with Trevor Lawrence and the way this offense is playing out, if the assumption of rational coaching plays out a little bit more, I would just expect Laviska Shenault to start being the top scoring guy, maybe Marvin Jones having that touchdown upside, and then DJ Chark, I think you're going to be waiting for a lot of fourth quarters for him to pay off, which could happen. Yeah, which could happen the way this offense is shaping up right now.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, my friend. Beautifully said. And that is a wrap for tonight's episode. As always, it was a pleasure, Ty. Anybody listening, thank you for sticking it out. Coach Craig, you're the bomb, buddy. Always in the comments from start to finish. We love you, brother. Just want to keep pumping that site, truenorthffb.com. Go check it out. We got some cool resources on there, some cool data. I just really like what we're doing. The articles are pumping from the team. Everybody's bought in and invested and really just love the work that's happened over on the .com. Follow the brand on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB. Follow this particular show on Twitter at TNFFPod. Go check out Trophy Smack, Monkey Knife Fight, and the Fantasy Points, fantasypoints.com, because we love all of them and doing great work in their own right. And then as far as the TNFF network for the rest of the week, go check out SODFS next week. The boys, D Brown and Nate, are hitting their stride on the Sons of DFS show. And it's really good content. I'm learning a lot about DFS as somebody who hasn't historically dabbled so much. And then we got the point after on Friday with Jules doing great work. He's got a little bit of a DFS touch and a little bit of a season-long touch. So it's a nice versatile way to finish off your week on the TNFF network. So make sure you subscribe to that channel. Sub dat. Beam, 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 beam. Right, Ty? Is that how the kids say it? Yeah.
Smash that subscribe or smash that like button.
Smash the like button. Yep, absolutely. So, any parting shots for the people, my brother?
Nope. Sons of DFS tomorrow night. Let's do it.
Let's go. 9 p.m. Eastern right here. But until next week, I am Trav. That is Ty. This is the True North Fantasy Pod, and we will see you then. Peace.